Welcome back to my channel. Like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. I've been on a sabbatical. I haven't been posting videos because y'all ain't interested no way. So that's pretty much how I feel. But we back into our book, 48 Laws of Power, Law 18. Do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous. I never thought about it because I always looked at isolation as a good thing. While you working on yourself, trying to better yourself, maintain your thoughts, figure out your future and things you wanted to do. So I never thought about it like this. This law advises that isolating yourself is detrimental, as it cuts you off from vital information, makes you an easier target, and causes you to lose your sense of proportion. Instead of retreating, you should mingle with others, find allies, and stay connected to your environment to remain aware of threats and opportunities. Retreating and isolation cuts you off from important news and developments. Isolation makes you conspicuous and vulnerable to attack from hidden enemies. Being cut off from the outside world can lead to an obsession with details while losing sight of the bigger picture. The act of being social and having connections is crucial for maintaining power and influence. Isolation breeds a fear of enemies, making you more susceptible to paranoia and poor judgment. Engage with diverse groups to gather information and build alliances. And I never thought about it that way, ever. Oh. The world is dangerous and enemies are everywhere. Everyone has to protect themselves. A fortress seems like the safest, but isolation exposes you to more dangers than it protects you from. It cuts you off from valuable information. It makes you conspicuous and an easy target. Better to circulate among people, find allies, mingle. You are shielded from your enemies by the crowd. Qi Chang Ti, the first emperor of China, was the mightiest man of his day. His empire was vaster and more powerful than Alexander the Great. He had conquered all the kingdoms surrounding his own kingdom, Axin, and unified them into one massive realm called China. But in the last years of his life, few, if anyone, saw him. The emperor lived in the most magnificent palace built to that date in the capital Haixiang. The palace had 270 pavilions. Damn. All of these were connected by secret underground passageways, allowing the emperor to move throughout the palace without anyone seeing him. He slept in a different room every night, and anyone who inadvertently laid eyes on him was instantly beheaded. Only a handful of men knew his whereabouts, and if they revealed it to anyone, they too were put to death. The first emperor had grown so terrified of human contact that when he had to leave the palace, he traveled incognito, disguising himself carefully. On one such trip through the provinces, he suddenly died. His body was borne back to the capital in the emperor's carriage, with a cart packed with salted fish trailing behind it to cover up the smell of the rotting corpse. No one was to know of his death. He died alone, far from his wives, his family, his friends, and his couriers, accompanied only by a minister and a handful of eunuchs. Damn, that's sad. Shai Tai started off as King Axin, a fearless warrior with ambition. Writers of the time describe him as a man with a waspish nose, eyes like slits, the voice of a jackal, and the heart of a tiger or wolf. He could be merciful sometimes, but more often he swallowed men up without a scruple. It was through trickery and violence that he conquered the provinces surrounding his own and created China, forging a single nation and culture out of many. He broke up the feudal system, and to keep an eye on the many members of royal families that were scattered across the realm's various kingdoms, he moved 120,000 of them to the capital, where he housed the most important courtiers in a vast palace. He consolidated the many walls on the borders and built them into the Great Wall of China. He standardized the country's laws, its written language, even the size of the cartwheels. As part of this process of unification, however, the first emperor outlawed the writings and teachings of Confucius. I never knew that. The philosopher whose ideals on moral life had already become virtually a religion in Chinese culture. I did not know that. On his order, thousands of books relating to Confucius were burned. Anyone who quoted Confucius was to be beheaded. This made many enemies for the emperor, and he grew constantly afraid, even paranoid. The executions mounted. A contemporary writer, Han Fu Chu, noted that Xin has been victorious for 4 generations, yet has lived in constant terror and apprehension of destruction. As the emperor withdrew deeper and deeper into the palace to protect himself, he slowly lost control of the realm. Eunuchs and ministers enacted political policies without his approval or even his knowledge. They also plotted against him. By the end, he was emperor in name only, and was so isolated that barely anyone knew he had died. He had probably been poisoned by the same scheming ministers who encouraged his isolation. This is what isolation brings. Retreat into a fortress and you lose contact with your sources of power. You lose your ear for what is happening around you, as well as a sense of proportion. Instead of being safer, you cut yourself off from the kind of knowledge or on which your life depends. Never enclose yourself so far from the streets that you cannot hear what is happening around you, including plots against you. That why I never ever thought about it like that. Oh, this thing is bothered. Oh, I had to take that out. Wow. Louis XIV had the Palace of Versailles built for him and his court in the 1660s, and it was like no other royal palace in the world. As in Beehive, everything evolved around the royal person. He lived surrounded by nobility, who were allotted apartments nestled around his. Their closeness to him depended on their rank. The king's bedroom occupied the literal center of the palace and was focus of everyone's attention. Every morning, the king was greeted in the room by a ritual known as lever. At 8 a.m., the king's first valet, who slept on the floor of the royal bed, will awaken his majesty. Then pages would open the door and admit those who had a function in the lever. The order of their entry was precise. First came the king's illegitimate sons and his grandchildren, then the princes and princesses of blood, and then his physician and surgeon. There followed the grand officers of wardrobe, the king's official reader, and those in charge of entertaining the king. Next would arrive various government officials in ascending order or rank. Last but not least came those attending the lever by special invitation. By the end of the ceremony, the room would be packed with well over 100 royal attendants and visitors. The day was organized so that all the palace energy was directed and passed through the king. Louis was constantly attended by courtiers and officials, all asking for his advice and judgment. To all their questions, he usually replied, "I shall see." As Saint Simon noted, if he turned to someone, asked him a question, made an insignificant remark, the eyes of all present were turned on this person. It was a distraction that was talked of and increased prestige. There was no possibility of privacy in the palace, not even for the king. Every room communicated with another, and every hallway led to larger rooms where groups of nobles gathered constantly. Everyone's actions were interdependent, and nothing and no one passed unnoticed. The king not only saw to it that all the high nobility was present at his court, he demanded the same of minor nobility. At his lever and kosher at his meals in the gardens of Versailles, he always looked about him, noticing everything. He was offended if the most distinguished nobles did not live permanently at court, and those who showed themselves never or hardly incurred his full displeasure. If one of these desired something, the king would say proudly, "I do not know him," and the judgment was irrevocable. Louis XIV came to power at the end of a terrible civil war, the Fronde. A principal instigator of war had been the nobility, which deeply resented the growing power of the throne and yearned for the days of feudalism when the lords ruled their own fiefdoms and the king had little authority over them. The nobles had lost the civil war, but they remained a ferocious, resentful lot. Machiavelli, oh my goodness, he got Machiavelli in here. Machiavelli makes the argument that in a strictly military sense, a fortress is a mistake. It becomes a symbol of power's oscillation, and it is an easy target for its builders' enemies. Designed to defend you, fortresses actually cut you off from help and cut in your flexibility. They may appear impenetrable, but once you retire to one, everyone knows where you are, and a siege does not have to succeed to turn your fortress into a prison. With their small and confined spaces, fortresses are also extremely vulnerable to the plague and contagious diseases. In a strategic sense, the isolation of a fortress provides no protection and actually creates more problems than it solves. Because humans are social creatures by nature, power depends on social interaction and circulation. To make yourself powerful, you must place yourself at the center of all things. That's a fact. As Louis XIV did in Versailles. All activities should evolve around you, and you should be aware of everything happening on the street and of anyone who might be hatching plots against you. The danger for most people comes when they feel threatened. In such times, they tend to retreat, close ranks to find security in this kind of fortress. In doing so, however, they come to rely for information on a smaller circle and lose perspective on events around them. They lose maneuverability and lose perspective on events around them. They lose mobility and become easy targets, and their isolation makes them paranoid. As in warfare, most games of strategy, isolation often precedes defeat and death. Wow. In moments of uncertainty and danger, you need to fight this desire to turn inward. Instead, make yourself more accessible. Seek out old allies and make new ones. Force yourself into more and more different circles. This has been the trick of powerful people for centuries. The Roman statesman Cicero was born in lower mobility and had little chance of power unless he managed to make a place for himself among the aristocrats who controlled the city. He succeeded identifying everyone with influence, figuring out how they were connected to one another. He mingled everywhere, knew everyone, and had such a vast network of connections that an enemy here could easily be counterbalanced by an ally. The French statesman Talleyrand played the game the same, although he came from one of the oldest aristocratic families in France. He made a point of always staying in touch with what was happening in the streets of Paris, allowing him to foresee trends and troubles. He even got certain pleasure out of mingling with shady criminal types who supply him with valuable information. Every time there was a crisis, a transition of power to end a directory, the fall of Napoleon, the abdication of Louis XVIII, survive. Yeah, he was able to survive and even thrive because he never closed himself up in a small circle, but always forged connections with a new order. This law pertains to kings and queens and to those of highest power. The moment you lose contact with your people, seeking security and isolation, rebellion is brewing. Never imagine yourself so elevated that you can afford to cut yourself off from even the lowest echelons. By retreating to a fortress, you make yourself an easy target for your plotting subjects who view your isolation as an insult and reason for rebellion. Wow, since humans are such social creatures, it follows that the social arts that make us pleasant to be around can be practiced only by constant exposure and circulation. The more you are in contact with others, the more graceful and at ease you become. Isolation, on the other hand, engenders an awkwardness in your gestures and leads to further isolation as people start avoiding you. Wow, I never thought of it like this. Finally, since power is a human creation, it is inevitably increased by contact with other people. Instead of falling into the fortress mentally, view the world in the following manner. It is like a vast Versailles with every room communicating with another. You need to be permeable, able to flow in and out of different circles and mix with different types. That kind of mobility and social contact will protect you from plotters who will be unable to keep secrets from you, and from your enemies who will be unable to isolate you from your allies. Always on the move, you mix and mingle in the rooms of the palace, never sitting or settling in one place. No hunter can fix his aim on such a swift-moving creature. That was so good, and this is a wow. On Law 19, gonna be kind of wow. So don't isolate yourself. This was really good, and I never thought about it like that at all, about isolation. I always thought isolation was good because especially trying to know yourself, trying to make decisions, sometimes you need to block out, all that noise and stuff and clear your head. Maybe that part is good, but I guess permanent isolation, wow. And I could see where paranoia could set in. Anyway, like, share, subscribe. That's Law 18.